Picture this. You're the most brilliant doctor the world has ever seen. Crowds cheering your name, an absolute legend in the medical world. And then, out of nowhere, you get yanked into a completely different world. And everyone around you is laughing in your face, treating you like some washed-up nobody, with zero clue that pretty soon, they're all going to be eating their words. This is the story of a kid named Falma, who was once treated like a total failure by the entire world. Everything changed the day he watched the most important person in his life slip away, taken by an incurable disease. That's the exact moment something inside him snapped. He made himself a quiet promise, almost like a vow to the heavens. He was going to become the kind of doctor the world had never seen before, and he'd never let anyone else feel the pain he felt that day. Years went by, and Falma didn't just keep that promise. He blew every expectation out of the water. He became the most brilliant pharmacist on the planet. But behind all those miracles was one seriously unhealthy habit. Falma barely slept, like 1 hour a day max, trading rest for endless research. Then one day, after setting his alarm like always, the unexpected happened. He woke up, but not in his lab, somewhere completely unfamiliar. There was a girl standing right in front of him, a total stranger. The room around him was fancy, quiet, almost too surreal to be real. Confused, he stumbled over to the window and just stood there, staring at the view in total disbelief. This was not his world, and the body he was currently living in wasn't his either. At first, he figured it had to be some insanely vivid dream. But the girl, who introduced herself as Ellen, said something weird. She told him he'd gotten struck by lightning the day before, and that it had probably scrambled his brain. That's when it really hit him. Somehow, Falma had been transported to another world and into another body. Playing along like he understood what was going on, he asked for her name and got a bonus crash course on his brand new life. Apparently, he now belonged to a noble family, a massive estate, fine clothes, a life of luxury just handed to him. But the wildest part was the family legacy. They were all royal physicians, insanely respected, and honestly, ridiculously talented. Ellen introduced the rest of the family. Bruno, the most celebrated doctor in the kingdom, and apparently his father, Beatrice, his sweet mother, Lauda, his little sister, and his older brother Pierre, who was off on some expedition beyond the kingdom's borders. The whole family was made up of medical prodigies, and get this, they weren't just relying on science. This world had an extra ingredient, sacred powers. When Falma asked what that even meant, Ellen looked at him like he just asked how breathing works. She reminded him that he was supposedly incredibly gifted in water magic. Except if he couldn't show off that gift right now, things were about to get ugly. Nobles were required to master their element, and without that, he'd get kicked out, maybe even disowned. Panicking, Falma played the amnesia card. He claimed the lightning strike had scrambled his memories, hoping to buy himself some time to figure out what the heck was going on. Alone in his room, he sat down and really thought about it. How in the world did this water magic thing even work? In a pretty desperate experiment, he pictured the molecular structure of water, and that's when it happened. A weird energy shot through his entire body. Water burst out like a geyser, completely out of control, non-stop. He ran to the window screaming while gallons and gallons soaked the entire garden. He finally managed to shut it off, drenched and thoroughly freaked out. Outside, Ellen was standing there, soaked from head to toe, but somehow beaming with joy. She was convinced he'd finally gotten his powers back. But Falma hadn't seen anything yet. He discovered another trick right after. With his left hand, he could create metal. With his right, he could erase it completely. Alchemy and magic working together in perfect balance. That's when someone knocked on the door. He scrambled to erase the evidence before Ellen walked in. She told him Bruno wanted to see him. Just a routine checkup, according to her, but Falma was suspicious immediately. Before heading out, Ellen asked if he still remembered his medical knowledge. Bruno was famous for throwing out surprise questions about super rare treatments, and getting it wrong wasn't an option. When he met with the family, Falma tried to act normal. Bruno seemed satisfied at first, until he suddenly asked how to prepare a specific ointment for deep wounds. Without missing a beat, Falma rattled off the procedure with jaw-dropping precision. Bruno nodded, satisfied, and told his son to keep studying with Blanche, his personal tutor. Blanche, Bruno's former star student, was this powerful combo of strict mentor and secretly a genius. She trained Falma in both medicine and magic, but pretty quickly she noticed something was off. His calm demeanor, the way he talked, the tiny shifts in his expressions. This wasn't the same Falma she used to know. She asked if he even remembered her. He gave her a half-truth. The lightning had changed him, maybe even caused amnesia. Blanche smiled gently, accepted the excuse, and offered to start his lessons completely from scratch, confident that with enough time, everything would come back to him. And so training began again. Blanche explained that their world revolved around 5 elemental magics: water, fire, earth, air, and the rarest of them all, the void. Right in the middle of her explanation, Pharma cut in, curious, asking about void magic, and her expression shifted into a cautious smile. She admitted that, honestly, nobody really knew much about it. It was something whispered about in ancient scriptures and sacred scrolls, but personally, she figured it was just a myth. Still curious, Pharma asked if anyone had ever had the ability to create materials out of pure will. Blanche froze on the spot, staring at him like he'd just declared himself a god. She dismissed the idea immediately, calling it absolutely impossible. Pharma, of course, kept quiet. He already knew he could do it. To dodge any more weird questions, Blanche took him down to a riverbank for a hands-on lesson. She brought up magic staffs, tools that boost your magic and make training easier. Pharma vaguely remembered seeing one, but had no idea it was actually his. Without hesitation, Blanche handed over her own staff and told him to fire a water spear at the river. He had no clue what that even meant, so she showed him. A graceful jet of magic shot out of the staff and hit the water like a missile. It looked easy enough. Pharma gave it a try. The result? No neat little water orb. A full-blown tsunami erupted instead. The entire riverbank exploded under the force of the wave. Terrified, Pharma dropped the staff, and the chaos stopped instantly. Blanche stood there speechless, staring at the destruction, asking exactly when he'd gained that kind of power. Without waiting for an answer, she pulled out a magical device used to measure someone's energy levels. The second Pharma touched it, it shattered into pieces. Blanche started shaking. Nothing about this was normal. Suddenly, a strange light glowed on Pharma's shoulder. Blanche's breath caught in her throat. It was one of the sacred seals described in long-forgotten scriptures, symbols tied to divine power. They kept walking, but Blanche started squinting, straining to see. Her glasses had broken in all the chaos, and she could barely make anything out. Pharma suggested a trick to fix her vision. At first, she thought he was messing with her, but she followed the instructions anyway. Her vision cleared up instantly. Shocked, Blanche spun around to face him, stunned. But Pharma was even more floored by his own next discovery. All he had to do was look at someone, and he could spot injuries inside their body, with the exact location and nature of the damage. It was like he'd developed some kind of divine diagnostic tool built right into his eyes. While Pharma was explaining what he was seeing, Blanche started backing away, her face going pale. She'd noticed something, chilling. His shadow wasn't showing up on the ground. She froze, then completely broke down in pure terror. When Pharma tried to help, she screamed and bolted, running away for good. The next day, Bruno was in his office with some worrying news. Blanche had gotten seriously ill. A fever had taken over her whole body, and she'd already handed in her resignation. Bruno asked if Pharma had any idea what happened. Pharma thought it over and said he wasn't responsible. Bruno nodded quietly and handed him some medicine along with a sealed letter, asking him to go check on Blanche's condition. Pharma took the medicine, examined it carefully, and immediately recognized it. It was just a basic nutritional supplement. It wasn't going to do anything for someone dealing with severe stress and fever, so he decided to whip up a real remedy himself, custom-tailored to her condition. When he got to Blanche's house, he walked into a scene straight out of a spy movie. Blanche was hiding behind a metal shield, talking to him through a locked door. Her voice was shaking as she accused him of coming to silence her for good. In her head, she'd uncovered his terrifying secret, and now he'd come to wipe her off the map. Pharma was baffled. He asked what kind of madness that was and reminded her he was only there on his father's orders, to check on her health. He'd brought 2 doses, one from Bruno, another he'd made himself. But Blanche, in the middle of a full panic spiral, collapsed to the floor and started crying. She was convinced the medicine was poison. She begged him not to kill her and swore she'd never tell anyone what she'd seen. Pharma tried to calm her down, explaining that he was the one who actually needed help. He admitted he didn't understand the nature of his own powers and couldn't control them. That's exactly why he needed her. Blanche was the only person who'd witnessed what he was capable of, and maybe the only one who could help him get a handle on it. To ease the tension, he pulled out a small bouquet of flowers he'd brought and left it by the door. He said he wasn't trying to force anything, and whether she wanted to help or not, he just wanted to say thanks for everything. Then he left. That night, Blanche sat alone, thinking. His words kept echoing in her head. Despite the fear, some part of her knew he was telling the truth. He wasn't a monster. He was just a scared kid, carrying a power capable of taking down an entire kingdom. The next morning, Falma was walking through the palace garden when a familiar voice called out to him. It was Blanche. She'd come back with a whole new resolve. She told him training would start immediately. If he didn't learn to control his powers, he risked destroying everything around him without even realizing it. Falma got emotional, grateful, and relieved, and followed her to a training spot way out from the city. The moment they started, it was obvious. His power was completely off the charts. By the end of the day, the training field looked like an actual war zone. Later, back at the palace, Falma sat alone on the stone steps. He started using his sacred eye to secretly scan the servants around him. With every illness he spotted, the affected area on that person's body would glow with a little white light, confirming the diagnosis. Not even Ellen, the always smiling maid, escaped his scan. Her hands lit up, worn down from hours and hours of hard labor. And that's how Falma's real journey to master his powers actually began. Not as some miracle doctor from another world, but as a healer reborn, with abilities capable of completely transforming that world. After secretly scanning every servant in the palace, Falma headed straight to his father's lab. He'd written down every condition, every symptom, and now it was time to act. First up, Ellen. Fully focused, he started prepping each treatment. Missing an ingredient? No problem. He'd just synthesize it himself. Hours went by, but Falma stayed locked in there, cooking up remedies until every formula was finally ready. Once the doses were done, he personally delivered Ellen's, super casually, just mentioning it was for the injury on her hands. She blinked, stunned, too touched to even say anything. One by one, he visited the other servants, handing each of them the right remedy for their condition. What came next was pure emotional chaos. Then Ellen dropped a real bombshell. She explained that regular folks like them had never actually gotten treatment before. Top-tier doctors simply weren't allowed to examine commoners, and even if they were, the costs were impossible to afford. Falma was floored. This wasn't just about medicine. It was an entire system rigged against the poor. He made a quiet vow. Disease doesn't pick between nobles and street sweepers. Everyone deserves a shot at getting cured. Not long after, Bruno called for him. When Falma walked into the room, his father's expression already said it all. Both his parents looked wrecked. Bruno explained that Falma's sister, Lottie, had come down with a severe, highly contagious skin disease. There was no cure, and she was already in isolation. Nobody could get near her. But Falma wasn't nobody. He went back to his room and started researching immediately. Based on Bruno's description, he quickly diagnosed the illness. It was something that had been cured in his old world not long before his previous life ended. With no time to waste, he whipped up the medicine from scratch. Even the rarest materials he produced with his own hands. Under cover of night, he snuck into Lotta's room. He sat beside her and quietly reassured her, asking her to keep the visit a secret. Bruno would be furious if he found out. When he said he'd brought medicine, Lotta groaned and hid under the blanket. She hated the taste. Falma laughed and revealed a surprise. This time, the medicine tasted like candy. She peeked out from under the covers, suspicious. But when she tried the dose, her whole face lit up. It was sweet, literally and figuratively. The girl was thrilled. The next day, Bruno and Falma went back to Lotta's room together. To everyone's shock, she was completely cured. Not a trace of the disease left. Bruno was stunned. Nobody had ever recovered that fast from that illness. But Lotta kept her promise. She didn't tell anyone a thing. That night, Falma sat alone in his study. Using his powers, he built a microscope capable of seeing viruses at the molecular level. He started analyzing them, gearing up for whatever battles lay ahead. Suddenly, a knock at the door. The head servant came rushing in, saying Bruno needed him urgently. Within minutes, Falma was standing next to his exhausted-looking father. The royal palace had summoned them both. The princess was in critical condition. When they arrived, they were greeted by the princess's personal physician, Cedric, who led them to her room. It was pure chaos. A swarm of doctors packed the room, whispering with worried faces. Bruno walked in, took one look. The princess could barely breathe, and got straight to work. He drew a blood sample, used diagnostic magic, and quickly reached his conclusion. There was no hope. He told Cedric the only option now was to ease her suffering. Falma froze. He couldn't believe his father was giving up. Bruno came back with a painkiller and administered it carefully. The princess, barely able to speak, asked if she was going to make it. Bruno lied, said of course she would, but Falma had already activated his sacred eye, and what he saw confirmed his worst fear. She'd been hit with a lethal lung disease known as the death sickness. In his head, a treatment plan started forming. Risky, but it might just work. That's when the doors burst open. A little boy ran up to the princess, sobbing. It was her son, begging his mom to stay alive. Pharma stepped forward. He asked the princess to let him take over her treatment and personally guide her through recovery. Bruno exploded with rage, yelling at him to know his place. But the princess silenced everyone with a single command. She said she knew exactly who to trust. The others had already given up. Pharma hadn't. And just like that, he got full authorization. Racing to the palace lab, Pharma didn't waste a second. He sealed the doors with a massive wall of ice, locking everyone out. Then he started sketching out the chemical formula, his mind racing faster than ever. The moment he finished, the ice wall shattered behind him. Bruno stormed in like a hurricane, eyes blazing, demanding to know what Pharma was up to. Pharma calmly answered. He was making medicine to save the princess, but Bruno completely lost it. He shouted that the disease was incurable and that this so-called cure could end up killing her. Then, in a fit of blind fury, he tore up Pharma's notes and hit him, convinced his son was cooking up poison. Pharma didn't fight back. Not at first, but then, without saying a single word, without lifting a single staff, he summoned a massive wall of ice using pure willpower alone. Bruno stumbled back, stunned. That kind of magic was impossible. No incantation, no staff. He stared at Pharma and asked the question burning inside him. Who, exactly, was this kid? Pharma stayed silent. That's when Bruno noticed a small notebook full of complex chemical formulas, each one tackling a disease once considered incurable. Finally, he spotted the sacred seal glowing faintly on his son's shoulder. He asked when it had shown up. Pharma answered simply, ever since the lightning strike, everything had changed. And finally, Bruno believed him. Pharma wasn't just some regular kid. His powers went way beyond anything his father had ever seen. With urgency in his voice, Pharma asked them to hurry and finish the medicine because time wasn't on their side. Then he dissolved the ice barrier in front of him without even breaking a sweat. Bruno stood there, frozen, not by the ice, but by pure shock. What exactly had his son turned into? Without wasting any more time, Pharma focused on finishing the princess's medicine. Once he'd carefully completed the formula, he left the lab with his face covered by a protective mask and headed straight to her chambers. But before starting the treatment, he had something to show her. Using the microscope he'd built himself, he demonstrated the real culprit behind her illness. He asked the princess to look through the lens, toward the light. Then he asked a servant to bring a candle closer to illuminate the view, and that's when the shock hit. The princess recoiled, horrified. Right there in front of her, countless bacteria swam across her field of vision, the real monsters behind the disease. She immediately called Cedric over and handed him the microscope. The moment he peeked through the lens, he froze in shock too. None of the doctors in the room could believe what they were seeing. That strange device, that invention, wasn't magic. It was science. Pharma broke the silence calmly, explaining that a virus had invaded her lungs, unleashing an army of aggressive bacteria multiplying way too fast. But he'd developed a treatment capable of completely wiping out the infection, with one condition. The princess needed to take the medicine without skipping a single dose for 6 months straight. It sounded like a long time, but it promised full recovery and a body even stronger than before. To prove it was safe, Pharma poured 2 cups of the medicine and drank one himself in front of everyone. He promised he'd personally oversee her recovery throughout the entire treatment. After that, the doctors swarmed Pharma like bees, firing off questions, how he'd built the microscope, what was in the medicine, and so on. A little later, Bruno was spotted sitting with Pharma, swapping ideas and thoughts. It was obvious. His pride in his son was growing by the minute. During the conversation, Pharma mentioned he wanted to make the formula public, to help anyone who needed it. But Bruno warned that doing that could be dangerous. Pharma could become a target. Still, he promised to back his son up, no matter what it cost. Later that day, Pharma went back to the palace to check on the princess's condition. Before he could even step into her room, a servant named Jean pulled him aside. He whispered that the princess had decided to reward him generously. Pharma looked surprised, almost confused. John couldn't believe the reaction. He reminded him that he'd saved the princess's life when nobody else could. A reward was the least he deserved. John asked if he wanted wealth, power, or both. But Pharma's answer caught everyone off guard. His only dream was to open a clinic where anyone, rich or poor, could get treated without worrying about money or status. Right after, Pharma checked on the princess and felt relieved seeing her fully healthy. She expressed her gratitude. saying it wasn't just the medicine that saved her. It was his words, his presence, the hope he brought. At that moment, Pharma stood up and asked her to imagine what would have happened if she'd just been an ordinary citizen. He reminded her that plenty of poor people needed that exact same hope, and before leaving, he insisted she stick with the full treatment until the very end. Months went by. The princess was fully recovered. One day, sitting with Bruno in the palace office, she announced that he and Pharma should attend a royal celebration honoring her recovery the next day. When the day came, Bruno and Pharma walked into the main hall and were completely stunned. The place was packed with nobles, doctors, and important figures from across the kingdom. Then the princess appeared, healthy, glowing, every bit royal. She greeted Bruno warmly, thanked him for everything, and granted him the entire region of Arcel, famous for its rare medicinal herbs. And then the whole hall went silent when she called out Pharma's name. He froze, in disbelief, but eventually stepped forward. Right there, in front of the crowd, the princess announced his promotion from apprentice to royal physician. She handed him the royal crest and issued an official order. A personal pharmacy would be built for him, right in the heart of the kingdom's capital. It was the moment Pharma had always dreamed of. Not long after, a group of skilled craftsmen showed up at his house. They announced that, by royal order, construction on the clinic would start immediately. Pharma got nervous and asked for some time to prepare. That's when Blanche walked in and announced that her father had assigned her to stay with Pharma until the clinic was finished. He tried explaining that he needed a few days to finalize the design, but Blanche just stared at him and asked if he'd lost his mind. According to the law, if the workers didn't start building right away, they could be executed. No pressure at all, right? Realizing he had no choice, Pharma sat down, grabbed a pen, and started sketching out the clinic's blueprint. Construction started immediately. As the workers moved around, one of them asked what name he wanted on the sign. Pharma paused and said he remembered a bunch of names from his previous parallel world. That was apparently enough. The workers ran off to the sign and proudly wrote, "The Parallel World Clinic." Everyone looked confused. Was he being serious or just joking around? But to Pharma's surprise, Blanche genuinely loved the name. While they were admiring the place, a mysterious man walked up. He asked whose spot that was. Pharma said it was his and asked if the guy needed help. The man burst out laughing. His name was Salomon, head of the Commoners' Medical Guild. Instead of introducing himself properly, Salomon mocked Pharma, saying he'd do better opening a candy shop for kids. Blanche was about to jump in and defend him, but he cut her off. With a sarcastic smile, Pharma said that if he ever did open a candy shop, Salomon would probably be his very first customer. Then he asked if he needed to register with the guild to practice. Salomon answered, "Cold. Registration was only for regular doctors." Right when things seemed to calm down, Blanche came storming in and chewed the intruder out with some sharp words. She demanded to know what that nosy pest was doing there and told him to leave immediately. Her fierce tone worked like magic. Salomon spun around and bolted like his pants were on fire. Time flew by, and Pharma's clinic slowly turned into a full-blown healing hub. He'd already managed to buy all the essential equipment, but one thing was still missing: someone to handle the administration and finances. That's when Chiyu showed up, bouncing around like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. She proudly announced that she could read, do math, and had the multiplication tables completely memorized. According to her, nobody else was as qualified. Pharma appreciated the enthusiasm and agreed she was sharp, but reminded her the job needed someone older, with more experience. When he got back home, though, he found the whole house drowning in sadness. Everyone looked like they'd just watched the saddest drama of the year. Turns out Salder, the loyal head servant and financial manager under his father, had retired that very day. His knees just couldn't take it anymore, and he'd finally stepped down. Without hesitating, Pharma went to his father and offered to treat Salder's knees so the old man could keep helping out at the clinic. Bruno agreed, and as a reward for Pharma's initiative, handed him a massive chest. When Pharma opened it, his jaw nearly hit the floor. It was packed with cash. Bruno smiled and explained that keeping a clinic running took serious capital, and after his son's recent achievements, it was the least he could do. A month later, Pharma was sitting at the clinic with Blanche and a fully recovered Salder, but the place was quiet, eerily quiet. Only a handful of patients showed up now and then. Nobody understood why the crowds weren't coming. That's when Ellen walked in carrying a stack of papers under her arm. She'd taken the initiative to visit homes all across the capital, gathering opinions about the new clinic. Everyone was impressed by her guts. Apparently, people had their reasons for staying away. Some were scared of the cost, Others figured the clinic was only for nobles because of the royal seal, and a few felt intimidated by the guards at the door. The group brainstormed until Solder suggested putting up a board listing prices for consultations and treatments. He was sure that would clear up everyone's doubts. Right after, Bruno and Beatrice made a surprise visit to check on Pharma's progress. He proudly showed off the whole layout. The first floor handled treatment and check-in, the second held patient rooms, the third was for staff and supplies, and the fourth, his personal favorite, was the research lab, where new cures were being developed. Bruno was impressed by the structure and the details, but Pharma still vented his frustration about the lack of patience. That's when his mom casually dropped a suggestion that would change everything. She pointed out that the beauty industry was booming in the kingdom. If Pharma could create an affordable beauty product, it wouldn't just boost the clinic's visibility. It would pull in a whole new crowd. The idea sparked something in Pharma's head. He remembered a brilliant skincare project he'd started back in his old world, a product that could revolutionize beauty standards. Right as the excitement was building in the room, someone came running in, screaming for help. A woman had passed out and looked like she was on the verge of death. Without hesitating, Pharma bolted after the man. At the scene, a huge crowd was blocking a carriage. Pharma pushed his way through, got inside, and saw the poor woman barely breathing. Using his sacred eye, he examined her and found no sign of disease. But he noticed something strange, deep suction marks on her hands. The cause was clear. She'd gone through some primitive, harmful bloodletting therapy that left her dangerously anemic. He decided, right then, to bring her to the clinic. Back there, the woman, feeling a bit better, explained what had happened. Her fiancé had pressured her to lighten her skin tone using cosmetics. When she went looking for a doctor, the guy convinced her that losing a certain amount of blood would lighten her skin, instead of using actual creams. Pharma was furious and shocked at the same time. He treated her blood loss and made a promise. He'd create a completely safe cosmetic product that would win her over from the very first use. True to his word, just 1 week later, the woman, Esther, came back to the clinic. Pharma had prepared a cream that was more than safe. It reflected harmful rays, revived dead skin cells, and was gentle on every skin type. Esther was blown away, speechless. Thanks to her marketing skills and the affordable price, the product blew up in popularity. Pharma's clinic was suddenly overflowing with patients, and even churning out product in bulk, the stock kept flying off the shelves. He couldn't keep up with demand. Soon Esther came back with 2 friends looking for the miracle cream. Pharma had to break the bad news, sold out. But he mentioned he was working on a new batch and needed some help. That's when Esther had a brilliant idea. Open a separate branch, dedicated entirely to cosmetics. Pharma would handle production, and she'd run sales and distribution. The plan would take pressure off the main clinic. Pharma was thrilled, and Bruno backed the idea, revealing that Esther's family had deep roots in the investment world. Within days, a separate cosmetics branch opened under her management. Esther even hired a team of professional doctors to help run operations. Pharma could barely believe how much success that venture had achieved in such a short time. Not long after, Bruno decided to take the whole family on a trip to the Arcel region, the land the princess herself had granted them. There, they met Eleanor, the region's official and Bruno's new assistant, in charge of detailed reports on medicinal herbs and regional trade. In the middle of that peaceful moment, Bruno asked Pharma to check on Lotta, who'd wandered off toward the beach, even though she couldn't swim. Pharma rushed over and found Lotta and Talon playing by the shore. Lotta, all smiles, asked for permission to go into the water. Pharma hesitated but gave in with one clear condition: don't go past the shallow end. Right when everything seemed calm, Blanche showed up next to him and gently encouraged him to let the kids enjoy themselves. After all, it was their first time at the ocean. She invited him to come into the water too. In that moment, Pharma's gaze lingered on Lotta, and everything around him blurred as a memory came rushing back with full force. The scene shifted to a painful flashback. His sister from his first world, the warmth of the time they spent together, and the crushing helplessness of watching her slowly get taken by disease. Suddenly, the present snapped back, and disaster came with it. The calm sea turned violent without warning. A deadly current surged and dragged Lotta under the waves. She screamed, panicking, helpless. Pharma dove in on instinct, fighting against the water, trying to reach her, but the current was too strong, and Lotta kept slipping deeper and deeper, her consciousness fading as she drowned. Pharma, consumed by anguish, screamed inside that he'd already lost one sister. He wasn't about to let it happen again. And then something shifted. A massive explosion of energy burst out of him. The sea shook. A deafening roar tore through the air, carving out a colossal crater in the ocean. The water split open as a giant barrier formed, separating the two of them from the deadly current. Blanche's eyes slowly opened, completely shocked. There was Pharma, with an unconscious Lotta propped on his shoulder, wrapped in radiant energy, commanding the ocean itself. He carried her safely back to the sand. Lotta coughed, waking up, but her eyes were filled with fear. Blanche, still trying to process what she'd just seen, asked how he'd done that. Pharma admitted he had no idea. Maybe it was one of the sacred arts, but Blanche shook her head. In everything she knew, nothing in that world could explain a feat like that. That night, Pharma sat alone in his room, haunted by the day's events and by the terrified look on Lotta's face. Suddenly, the door creaked open. Ellen slipped in quietly and asked if he needed anything before bed. He hesitated, then apologized softly for scaring her. But she smiled and said she hadn't been scared, just amazed. The next morning brought zero peace. Pharma was at the clinic with Blanche, mentioning that even after a week off for the Arcel trip, people were still lining up outside. But something felt off. Two masked figures were lurking nearby, acting strange. Pharma approached, offered to help, but they said nothing and vanished without a word. Their presence left a weird tension in the air. And the next morning, disaster struck. One of the guards showed up early to open the clinic. That's when a runaway carriage came barreling forward and exploded. The news hit Pharma and Bruno like a punch to the gut. Bruno decided on the spot to report everything to the princess, while Pharma rushed to the scene. When asked if he suspected anyone, Pharma briefly thought about Salomon, the guild leader, and the masked figures, but chose to keep quiet. When he reached the wreckage, he just stood there, staring at the destruction in silence. Rebuilding would take time, maybe weeks. But then, unexpectedly, hope showed up. Young people he'd treated in the past came forward, offering to help. Soon, more people arrived, grateful patients, supporters. They stuck around, right by his side, refusing to leave until the clinic was rebuilt. In the middle of all this, a little girl came running in, crying. Her dad had passed out, she said, and was about to die. She begged Pharma to help. Without hesitating, he agreed, trusting the community to keep an eye on the clinic. As they got farther and farther from the city, something felt wrong. He asked the girl for the exact location, and that's when he realized she'd vanished. Suddenly, a circle of masked figures surrounded him. These weren't your average attackers. They were a cult of powerful temple priests, possibly with even more influence than the royal family itself. One of them had witnessed the ocean incident and noticed something chilling. Pharma cast no shadow at all. To them, that could only mean one thing. He was a demon, and they'd come to eliminate him. Pharma denied the accusation, insisting he was human. But the high priest gave the order, hands up, 3 steps back. Pharma complied. Instantly, a magic seal lit up beneath his feet, trapping him in a glowing energy prison. But in the blink of an eye, it vanished. The priest stood there, jaws dropped. One of them shouted that it was impossible. The seal was designed to trap demons. If it failed, that could only mean one thing. The man in front of them wasn't a demon at all. Even so, they refused to believe it. One priest attacked, conjuring a fierce whirlwind of fire that closed in from every direction. It should have ended right there, but Pharma raised a glowing barrier that shredded the flames without any effort. Another priest launched ice magic, but the spells disintegrated before even touching him, dissolved by the light of his sacred eye. Stunned, all the priests unleashed every spell they knew. Earth-shaking explosions, blinding lightning, violent winds. The ground shook, the forest shook. But when the smoke cleared, Pharma stood completely untouched, wrapped in a glowing shell of ice, calm as ever. He finally spoke, warning them that they'd brought this on themselves. Then, in one single motion, a storm of divine power erupted from his own body, vaporizing the attacks and dropping the high priest to his knees. Pharma stood there like some kind of avenging spirit, demanding silence. One wrong move, and their fate would be sealed. But then the unexpected happened. The high priest noticed a sacred mark glowing on Pharma's shoulder, a holy seal. It was the mark of divine light, a gift given only to the chosen. All the priests dropped to their knees, begging for forgiveness. Pharma stood there stunned, still not fully getting why everyone had suddenly submitted. Even he didn't completely understand what that mark meant. But one thing was certain, the world's view of him had changed forever. Right when things seemed to settle down, the high priest unexpectedly pulled a dagger from inside his robe, intending to take his own life to atone for the sin of attacking a divine being without knowing the truth. But in a split second, Pharma appeared in front of him and grabbed the blade, declaring that no harm would come to anyone while he was still alive. It quickly became clear, though, the high priest had suffered a serious internal injury and needed emergency surgery. Pharma, even while being upfront about his lack of surgical experience, decided he had no choice. There wasn't enough time. A large tent was set up in a hurry, and the priest was carefully carried inside. Pharma didn't waste a second. He started prepping the anesthesia, making sure to test for allergies first. Once everything was ready, he performed the operation with surgical precision. Moments later, he stepped out of the tent, calm, letting the priests know the surgery had been a success. He told them to take the patient back to the temple and make sure he got proper care. The priests, overwhelmed with gratitude, bowed deeply, their hearts full of respect for the man they'd tried to kill just hours earlier. Days passed, and the high priest, now fully recovered, visited Pharma's clinic again, but this time as a friend. In his hands, he carried a gift box. Inside was a magic staff, not just any relic, but one of the temple's sacred treasures. The priest explained that its powers were unknown and that it only responded to those deemed worthy. The moment Pharma touched the staff, it radiated a powerful light, recognizing him as its true wielder. Blanche, amazed by the sight, eagerly asked to hold it too. Pharma handed it over with a smile, but the staff slipped through her hands like mist and hit the floor. The priest laughed and said only the worthy could hold on to it. That alone proved Pharma wasn't just some healer. Smiling, Pharma picked the staff back up and had a wild idea. Without any warning, he hopped on it like it was a broomstick and launched himself into the sky. As the visit wrapped up, it became clear the temple had zero connection to the attack on Pharma's clinic. The high priest swore he'd find the real culprit. Before leaving, he handed Pharma a talisman, a divine amulet capable of nullifying sacred energy. The effect was immediate. Pharma's shadow, missing until then because of his divine nature, reappeared on the ground. He looked human again. Beaming, he thanked the priest from the bottom of his heart. With the priest's blessing and a promise fulfilled, Pharma set off with Lotta and Ellen on a tour around the kingdom, a promise he'd made to his sister. The trip took them through bustling markets, where they overheard a girl asking a pharmacist why Pharma's clinic products weren't sold there too. She argued it would save patients time and energy, but the doctor shook his head, saying the guild would never allow it. Doing that could bring serious punishment, even shutting the pharmacy down for good. Pharma, overhearing from a distance, took it seriously. He quickly gathered Lotta and Ellen and walked off, lost in thought. And then, like a lightning bolt, an idea hit him. He'd start his own medical guild, one that wasn't chained down by corrupt systems, a guild that would let real medicine spread freely across the entire kingdom. Blanche's excitement was impossible to miss. Mr. Assad, always reliable, promised to handle the legal side as fast as possible. Meanwhile, trouble was brewing elsewhere. Salomon, head of the Public Doctors Guild, called a secret meeting. His goal: take down Pharma's clinic once and for all. And the truth finally came out. It was Salomon who'd orchestrated the earlier attack. With Pharma's methods making real cures accessible, Salomon's profits had tanked. To him, this was never about medicine. It was business, and business was dying. The whole room burst into applause, except for one man. Dr. Breed stayed silent, clearly disturbed. A week later, Breed was seen running through the streets, carrying his sick daughter on his back. She was barely conscious. He pounded on the guild's doors, but nobody answered. Then, like fate stepping in, he crossed paths with Pharma. Pharma understood the urgency immediately. He told Breed to follow him to the clinic. Once there, he started firing off quick but crucial questions. Her name, her age, when she'd last eaten. He used his sacred eye to examine the girl and discovered a severe cold had turned into a critical condition. Breed watched in amazement as Pharma measured every detail, even her weight, to nail the exact dosage. The girl was admitted for observation. By the end of the day, her condition had improved dramatically. As they got ready to head out, Ellen, someone, handed Breed enough medicine for 5 days. The next day, Breed came back holding a single coin. He explained he couldn't afford real treatment, but swore he'd pay back whatever he could. Pharma simply told him the cost was 1 coin. Breed froze. How could such specialized care cost so little? That's when he finally understood the real reason the guild feared Pharma. Back home, his wife, Lena, celebrated their daughter's recovery. Breed told her it had been Pharma who treated the girl, describing him as a genius with divine power and unmatched knowledge, someone who gave care not for profit, but for the cause of healing. And that's it for today. Before we wrap up, huge shout out to everyone who always sticks around to watch until the very end. You guys are legends. And if you're hyped for what's coming next, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss a thing. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.